Hi crafters, Raquel here from Paints and Glitter. I'm a crafter for Tonic Studios, and today I'm coming along with the seasonal Wreath gift box die set. This is a 33-piece die set, and it's going to allow you to make a box in the shape of a wreath. And it's called seasonal because you do have options to decorate this with what will be the seasonal wreath paper collection. So I'll be sharing this with you today. And what I can tell you here is that you also get little detailed dies that will allow you to create a decorative lid to your box should you want to omit any other types of decorations. So you can keep it really simple if you would like to. But here, one of the inlay dies shows you a group of leaves. So there's 4 different leaves here and little swirls that go about that. Absolutely darling. And then, of course, it does create a wreath shape. So that's why these dies here are curved, for instance. And that way your lid can be created with that circular shape. So these, I'm going to show you how to put that together, of course. But the other feature of this beautiful die collection is the bow. So you have 3 pieces here that will allow you to create a bow with also pieces for the center, and these also have inlay dies. So if you want to make that really decorative, you can definitely do that. If not, you can definitely just use the solid dies that are included. So that way you use decorative papers or anything that's to your liking. Then you're going to see these pieces here. They're going to allow you to create what will be the edge of the lid. And then over here, you see this grouping of greenery and also 2 floral dies that you can also use to decorate what will be the lid of this box. You can also create compartments with this piece here. So if you are a gift giver and you like to compartmentalize perhaps little candies, you'll be able to do that as well, which I think is really neat. So let's show the papers here. I can't wait to get into this. So I haven't even opened these yet, but I can tell you that there are 36 sheets in this paper pack. They are 8 by 8. You get 3 each of 9 double-sided designs, and you do get 3 luxurious gold foiled designs. So you also get tags and stamps. So if you happen to have the tag and stamps die set, which I'll go ahead and link down below, then you'll be able to use that as well. That's been a bit of what I would call a tradition with Tonic Studios, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So let me get this open for you. So here's a closer look at these papers, and this is what I meant about the tags and stamps. This has that beautiful gold foiling, and with the dies that I mentioned, you'll be able to cut these out. So if you would like to include them as part of the 3D box, you can. If not, you can certainly use them for card making or scrapbooking or mini albums, anything like that you would like to decorate. And what you're seeing here, of course, are different seasons within the little images. So for instance, there's the butterfly here and the little bunnies, and then there's pumpkins, florals over here, and then fall-like leaves, and then some Christmas greenery and poinsettias here. And then again here, some other little items that are seasonal. Speaking of which, springtime, you can definitely use these images here if they're to your liking, with the little bunnies and the eggs, and the little wreath portions will be these here, which of course you can then cut out using the dies included. So that's really neat that you can opt for something that's already printed for you. Then the back of that, however, are florals. So if you prefer this side, then you can definitely use that instead. And then you can definitely fussy cut the little eggs if you wanted to use those. Then here is another one that has more little eggs all the way around, with also the little greenery. So the little images, of course, and the florals emulate the dies that are in the set, which I think is really pretty. And then on the back of this paper, you have a pretty stitch stripe that almost looks like yarn. I think that's really, really nice. And then you have these pieces here that will match. And if you're wondering what this is, these are the die portions, or the images, I should say, that coincide with the bow. So you can go ahead and cut this out in lieu of the decorative pieces, for instance, that are here, or you could of course combine both and then make a unique looking bow. But of course this is really forgiving because it's going to fit exactly where it needs to on that paper, and then that way you can design your pretty little bows. The back of that is this really subtle paper that almost looks like a very gentle watercolor, and then it has the greenery on the corners there. So that's really, really lovely as well as a background. Then here we have more of what I would say is more summery or spring colors that you can use. Very nice and vibrant, and it has the little butterflies, and of course you can fussy cut those out. And then there's also the watering can here, and more layers there with the vibrant blues and oranges and lavenders there. On this side you have a bright fuchsia with different pinks, and also the polka dots and butterflies and leaves in white. Very, very pretty. Then here are some more tropical-like flowers in terms of the colors here. So again, a floral background but with more vibrant colors. I really love this with that teal color, and then the blue roses as well as the fuchsia pink ones. This is really lovely. Then you get this gorgeous stripe. So I really like this one because it looks as if there's texture on the paper, but it's all from the actual design there. Super neat. Then here are these little bow pieces. So again, they match the ones prior, but in a different color palette there, which has the teals and the hot pink. And then here's a more subtle background with some pastels around the corners there and more of those pretty little butterflies. So here for the fall season, you have this palette, and then of course you have some gourds and pumpkins and some beautiful sunflowers. And on the back of that, you have this color. So this is absolutely stunning. I really like the grouping there and the different gourds with the sunflowers on the edges. So again, these are wonderful for this type of project, but should you be a person who loves to create mini albums or scrapbooks, then you could definitely use these for that. They're very, very good for that type of project. So here are falling leaves. So pretty. And it is a creamy background. It's not a stark white. And then on the back of that you have that taupe plaid with a window pane plaid design. And then there's this little bow which has the orange gingham, and then it does have this to look like burlap, which I have to say is so very realistic looking. If you saw this on a table, you would never know that that's paper. It's super neat. And then there's this softer color palette, which of course coincides perfectly with that taupe. Absolutely stunning. And then of course there's the Christmas. Oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. I am loving that striped bow, and then all the poinsettias and pine cones, and then there's those little stars in the background there as well. And here are the baubles or ornaments with the greenery on the edges there. So very pretty. And then there's this background with pine cones, poinsettias, and more greenery there. This one, however, has that gold foiling with the little stars, which is absolutely stunning. So let me take a peek at this. I meant to mention that. I forgot to mention these have foiling as well. So look at that shine. I just think it's so spectacular when that's added to the papers. Then you get your traditional red gingham, which I absolutely love. Just can't go wrong with that. And then you have your bow that coincides with the more Christmassy colors. And this one has the stripes. This one has the gold on burlap. So very pretty. And the back of that is going to be this very subtle color here with neutrals, more grays and greens there. So of course I'm going to start cutting some paper, and we'll make a couple of boxes here so that you get to see how lovely these are. To begin this wreath box, we're going to use 4 strips cut by the longer strip die, and that looks like this. If you want to to create a sturdier box, you can cut it out of heavier cardstock, then use the same die and cut away any of the tabs so that you have a way to decorate that border. We're also going to use this die, which is the only one that has the two other dies that will fit inside of it. That's going to be the one that you use for your lid. Cut that out 4 times for this particular wreath. And I've used the same exact die and then just cut away the tab layer to create the lid, and that will be the layer that I adhere directly on top. I've also used the layer die that fits inside to create the layer that will go inside of the lid. So we'll be decorating the outside and the inside. First thing to do here is to burnish this to start creating the curve. You also want to make sure that you fold the semi-circular tabs away from yourself. You're going to do this for all 4, of course. Set these aside for a moment once you've gotten them folded. And let's create what will be the foundation of the lid. So using the heavier cardstock, and I am using craft card from Tonic Studios, it's a little heavier. Then I'm going to join these following the score line that's created with the die. So only adhering the paper right onto that tab and using that score line there as a guide. You can get the correct angle there. So you want to make sure there's no paper surpassing there. So you'll know if you feel a divot there, it means you have the angle wrong and you can fix it. So you can go ahead and use that line. This will close it off, of course, in a circle. So you're going to make sure that it dries properly. So give yourself time, allow it to dry. Burnish that nicely. Now, because I use the same die to cut the layer that's going to be decorative, that's going to fit exactly on top. But before I do that, I'm actually going to adhere this layer, this is going to be the outer layer, right onto this circle. I'm going to add a little bit of adhesive on those half moon tabs. I'm going to use the seam line as my guide as to where to begin and simply place this right on top. As I walk this all the way around, by pressure so that this dries all the way to that edge. I'm going to want to make sure that these are also joined. So there is also a score line on this portion here. You can see it. It's a little bit, looks like stitching. And you also want to adhere that to the adjacent strip. So make sure that you also join those as you adhere these. So that little portion is going to face the inside, while the tabs face the underneath of this wreath. And if you feel more comfortable adhering 2 strips at a time, you can do that, but the instructions do call for you to do this one at a time, and I think it's for good reason. You can still walk this all the way around. Make sure it's underneath. With your paper creaser, it makes it a whole lot easier to burnish that paper in place. Lastly, join the very last tab and make sure that you press that so that it adheres nice and straight there. You're going to repeat the same steps for the interior portion. Using the shorter of the two dies, cut 4 more strips so that you can join them along the inner portion of that circle. You're going to repeat the burnishing. Taking your paper creaser, be sure to burnish all 4 of these as well. And also fold the half moon tabs. These are going to adhere along this inner portion. So I'm actually going to burnish them pretty side out. I'm actually going to join 2 of them together first along that stitch line, and then I'll be placing them in the center. I think it just makes it a little bit easier if the strip is a tiny bit longer. So I'm going to join them there, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the other 2. Give that a moment to dry, and while that one's drying, I'll adhere 2 of these. And now my aim is to have this fit between one seam line and the next seam line on the opposite end. So placing it in here first makes it a little bit easier so that I know exactly where to start and end. If you want to meet the joints here, you can. To start that as the center line there might make it easier for you. And then again, placing adhesive on those half moon tabs. I'm going to place this in the middle, join those seam lines, and then apply pressure onto that paper. So I hold that down. I'm now going to join the other two, and I'm going to be overlapping these. So what I'm going to do is actually apply adhesive on these two tabs that join here first, and then aim those two tabs to the seam line in the center here, just to make it easier for myself. So I'm focusing more on that seam so that I know exactly where this is going to fit. Try to hold that in place as best as you can and keep burnishing this until you get this a nice tack and adhesion all the way around. So kind of pulling it toward the wreath layer as you burnish this. Once that's adhered, revisit the little tab portions so that these are adhered one to another there, and also on the opposite side where they overlap. Just a little drop of adhesive should be enough to hold those two pieces together. And now you can decorate the inside of this lid if you would like to, as I will, with the layers that fit right inside. This paper is so beautiful. Just looks super pretty to have that nice surprise. So of course the die cuts the paper so that it fits perfectly here. And now flip this over. You can now adhere this portion right on top, and it's okay to adhere it to this. It will cover all of the tabs because you use the same die that was used to cut the actual base. So the only thing removed here were those tabs that are on each end. I'm going to flip this over and burnish it from the inside. And this completes the lid. And of course, as I said before, you can definitely adhere a second layer to that outer brim. Do want to make sure that this is nice and straight as possible. Then you can move on to what will be the bottom. Now the bottom layer has a thinner circle that you'll be making. So you'll be using 4 strips to create the wreath portion. And of course I went ahead and also cut it out with the same die using the decorative paper to go ahead and adorn the inside. And I'm going to set those aside for a moment, and that is using the singular die here that does not have any layers that fit inside. Start here, creating this wreath. Once you have that, you are going to use the pieces cut out with these wider ones. So instead of the thin strips that go on the perimeter of the lid, these will create your strips. They're going to create the bottom of your box, and if you would like to, you can use those same dies to cut out the decorative layer that you would hear on top. So that's what I'll be doing. And I'm using this red gingham. I'm going to adhere it right on top. So you'll see how they fit, because all I did was cut away the tab and those half moon tabs on those pieces. While those are drying, I know that I want this gingham portion to face what will be the outside. So I'm going to burnish these with a curve so that this is in the palm of my hand with a pretty paper side up. So I'll repeat that on all four. Get these ready. Okay, so these are going to also adhere end to end, and the half moon tabs are going to face the inside of this strip. So I'm going to fold those away from myself, being very careful. So away from the pattern paper. These are going to be positioned in between each one of these score lines there, or joins. And they're also going to overlap. So if you're more comfortable adhering two at a time, then you can certainly do that. You can join them along the tab first and create a longer tab here, or a longer strip. And this is personal preference, of course. If you're not comfortable creating a longer strip, then by all means just leave them individually. I think it makes it a little bit easier. To your little half moon tabs and adhere them along the inside of your wreath base, starting at one of the seams and ending at a seam as well. This time, because the paper is wider, it's actually going to be a lot easier. Just make sure that you apply enough pressure. And of course the paper creaser is a perfect tool for that. And also take advantage of your table so that it acts as if it were another set of hands. And you do want to pull that paper toward the outer edge there. It will help. So if you want to take your time little by little, you can definitely do that. Just be sure to hold it in place exactly where you want it before you burnish it. And if it pulls away, just pull it right back and try again. Got the other side. I'll be adhering these half moon tabs again. And remember that these will overlap on the sides. So you see that? It's going to overlap the other one, so position that accordingly. And the decorative paper is going to help you in this instance. So that you know exactly how to position that. And apply your pressure. Make sure that you also adhere the seams as you did before. So just a little adhesive there, and then join those together. So maybe seeing it from this direction is a little bit easier. You get to see all those little tabs adhered there. You get to see I've added adhesive there, and I'll be adhering those two together. And they should overlap, but not by too much. So be sure that you've positioned this accordingly. And this is why I like to use the table as my gauge. Now I'm going to be doing the same for the outer edge, adhering all 4 of these. So you can do 2 by 2 if you'd like to. That way you get a really pretty seam here. And in this case, I'm going to burnish these so that the curve has the pretty paper facing out, the tabs facing the actual wreath. So I'm actually going to fold those away from the pretty paper. And join those two together. Before I begin. Place that paper right on top, and then just guide your paper around. So this is the part that you don't want to rush. You may want to allow your adhesive to become a little bit drier. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but the less water, then sometimes the more tacky it'll become. And then you can really burnish that very nicely. Again, making sure that the tabs are as close to that edge as possible. Get those nice and ready. And then you'll be adhering these along the bottom as well. So hold those nice and close to that edge and keep burnishing. With this wider tab, just to make sure that the seams match first. And then of course aiming this paper properly down here. So I can definitely start with the half moon tabs once again. And shape that to go all the way around. I'm now going to finish that last seam, adding adhesive once again to that tab that's remaining and making sure that this is nice and straight up and down. I'm going to join those two. And I am paying attention to how it looks from the outside, being careful here. So of course I have used craft card to create the base of this, and I really want this to have a pretty finish, even so. And as I showed you earlier, I did use the layering die to go ahead and cut what will be the inside layer. And I did use the same exact die as I had used for the base. So I'll be adding that first. And if you would like to, if you happen to have used a paper such as I have here, you could also cut some strips. I have cut mine at 9 3/8 inches long by 1.5 inch wide, and I'm actually going to adhere these on the inside just to really have that be nice and finished. Roll that in, find my placement, and make sure they're joined end to end. I'm also going to cover the inside, so you'll need at least 12 3/4 inches by 1.5. So I'm simply going to adhere this to create a collar around this, the inner circumference of this box here. And this is just to finish it off really pretty. I'm going to give myself enough paper here to overlap this so that it has a nice finish. So that gives it a nice sturdy finish all the way around. I'm also going to add the next layer here. So having used the same exact dies as you use for the foundation, you can cut another 4 pieces of paper, adhere them end to end, and then apply these on the bottom. And it also will last longer. Here I'm going to match the seams as best as I can, although it's not necessary. Just make sure that it's equidistant all the way around. Get a nice pretty finish. And also cover those unsightly tabs. So that completes the bottom. The inside, really, really pretty. And then, of course, if you want to repeat the strips on the inside of the lid, you can. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do it on the outside. And I've cut a strip just under, let's see, the measurement here is just under 1/2 inch. It's actually 1/16 less than 1/2 inch. And I've just cut up several strips in that size. And I didn't really measure the length, but it could very well be 8.5. I'm simply going to join these here along the outside to finish this off. Now that you have the foundation completely built, I think it looks really nice to have the extra pop of color going around it, especially with these pretty Christmas colors, very traditional. Then I'm going to set this aside for a moment while we work on the bow. These are the dies you will need to create your bow. If you can see here, there's this one, and it creates this long shape. Using this center portion here alone, cutting into that long shape twice, one on each end, so you'd cut it this way and then turn it around, cut it again, only using this portion here, then you're going to achieve this result. So I first faced it this way, ran that through my die cutting machine, then went ahead and met that halfway, cut it again, and I did that for all 4 of these pieces. You're also going to need, if you would like to, the solid piece, and the way that I'm going to use it is actually adhere it underneath to create a golden shadow in this case. That's optional. You could of course just use the larger piece in a different color if you prefer to do that, and then just adhere it right underneath. I'll be using that gold mirror card for that. Then you have the tail. I've gone ahead and used both of these dies to cut that red portion and only the solid piece to cut out the gold. So that'll layer right underneath to show that bit of shine there. Very pretty. Then you have your center portion. I've cut it out of the same red. And you have 2 layers. So those 2 layers you can cut out of any color you like. I'll be taking advantage of these pretty papers and just laying one in the middle, like so, and the smaller one right on top. Just by laying that right there in the middle, have a decorative portion, which I think is really pretty. And of course you could omit that if you wanted to and just use a flower or a gem. So before I begin, I'm just going to set that aside, and I'm actually going to start here so that I can just very easily join the tails. I'm only going to apply adhesive on the outer edge of that top layer. Place that right on top. And I'll continue to clean my hands as I assemble this, because inevitably you do get adhesive on your fingers. You can also clean the paper a little bit if you need to. Just don't be too aggressive with that. I'm going to set those two aside to dry. And now for this portion, you do need to very carefully curl this paper. I recommend you do it from the center out. If you're going to add the gold underneath, you can curl that as well. Just don't be too aggressive with it. Adhere 1/2 right behind this. I'm going to have the second piece join here in the middle. I'm now going to add a little drop of adhesive just on the smaller portion there that creates that little V shape, and I'm going to join those two together. You can use reverse tweezers if you'd like to hold these together for you. And I'm going to repeat that with all four. Now you technically don't have to cut into both sides of that bow, just to let you know. That's personal preference. You could certainly just do half of it and then leave the back of the bow solid that will face the actual foundation of your box. So this is just one option. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to place the tails on here first. And here you get to select how you want to place these, and depending on the paper you have used, you may want to add a little curl to it. And of course, if you are, just be mindful of the fact that your layers may come apart depending on how much adhesive you chose to add to them. But a little curl on just the little tails there would look really pretty, just to add a little bit of movement. You can just use your hands for this. Okay, I think it looks really cute. So of course you're going to pick the prettier portion of your box to be on the bottom if you're going to add all sorts of little items there on top. But here I'm just going to adhere it, starting again with the tails there. And second portion, I'm going to overlap slightly on the first, not by too much. And my apologies if that was a little out of focus. I did try to fix that. But now of course I have these four pieces for this type of volume, and of course you could opt for only two. That's really up to you. I like a nice curly bow, but I'm going to then choose which one of these is going to go on the bottom. Maybe I'll go for the flatter ones and add adhesive here. Position those nicely. And then this one you can have a little bit wider, a little bit closer, Depends on how you want that to look. You can actually assemble this on its own first. So what I'm going to do is fold this in a valley fold first. Apply adhesive on that tab. And then position this on top of the bow where I think it's going to look prettiest. Apply adhesive to that second tab and join these two together. I'm going to be a little more generous here with the adhesive so that it doesn't move. Place this centered and then allow that to lay right on top of the first one. Gives it a nice full bow with all that pretty shine. And of course you have some greenery that you can use. If you want to, you can add a little bit of ink to this or mousse. I'm going to use a little bit of peeled paint and just dab a little bit of this on the edges of these leaves. It's not too much. I decided I'm going to add a tiny bit of archival potting soil just here and there to create a little bit of shadow. This is not an oxide, so the intensity of the ink that you get with an archival ink will not change if you add any water splatters or any other ink on top. So it's great for those little vine centers to create a little depth. This small brush. Okay, so that completes that. So hopefully you're able to see how there's a little bit more dimension on that now. Can now add this to the front. So I'm simply going to sandwich this in between the layers. Just going to lift that up very lightly there, very gently, and add that in between. Now there's only one die for this type of leaf, but there are others that are included, and I'll show you what those look like. But I'm going to simply position this here and there, creating that wreath effect. Very gently apply some adhesive behind that. Not too much. Sneak that underneath the bow as well. Just under that little edge. Kind of walk this around. And there are these other leaves that are available. Very, very pretty. Add those around. There's also the little stem that you could add to the center, so that's another die available. If you want to create contrast, you can cut it in a different color as I have done. Of course, you don't have to. As you can tell, I didn't add it to the other leaf there. But there are these little stems. type of leaf here. And even smaller ones. Very nice and delicate. I like to simply take the tweezers and pinch the leaf around it to create a little bit of movement. Add them up here. Now the paper collection also has some images that you can fussy cut. I fussy cut the little stars that are part of the background, and I'll be placing those around as my little decoration for this one. So I'm simply going to strategically place some of these around here. There are other images such as these, so if you want to, you can certainly use them as part of how you decorate the front. It's up to you if you want to group them together, or if you simply want to use them as part of a card decoration. If you're going to create any cards, I think I would love it if there were a bunch of these little stars. I would cut them out of the background and use them, but since there's only one, I'm actually going to omit these. There's also this gorgeous bow, so if you wanted to omit this large one and just use this one on top, you could certainly do that. It's plenty beautiful. And then there are little flowers that you can also create. I've not used them for this one in particular, but if you want to add a little extra shine, you can use some crystal glaze. This will dry clear, and I'm simply going to use it on the little stars that I placed on here, and that way they do have a shiny finish rather than matte. Depending on the quantity of this that you add, because it is viscous, it'll dry with a dome layer, or you can just add a tiny amount and it'll be just like a Nouveau drop, just adding a little shine. I'm going to take some glitter that I have, it's called glass glitter, and I'm simply going to scoop this right on top of those stars. And this is going to give me some pretty texture on top of the shine. If you happen to use this type of medium, do not allow any children near it because it is created with glass. So it will cut your fingers if you're not careful. But this channel is not for children, so that should not be an issue. And I have one more little star here to address. Got my tiny little bit of glitter there. And now I can allow this all to dry. You have one more die in your set, and it looks like this. It's meant to create divisions inside of your box and also add sturdiness to it. If you choose to use it, you're going to want to cut 2 per division. And once you fold this, fold all of the tabs as a valley fold and burnish them. So I'm going to be doing that. And of course, you cut these in the color that you like. This is 300 GSM paper. I think if I'm going to add a sturdy wall inside of a box, I'm going to try to use the stronger paper. Once you have those fully folded, adhere only the center rectangle back to back, making sure that those little tabs remain open. Now apply adhesive to those tabs that you've opened all the way around, and then simply feed these where you think they should go, making sure that you apply pressure here and have these be meeting the sides accordingly, and the bottom. Once you've adhered those, now you have separate compartments so that if you want to fill these in with different types of candies or anything like that, then now you know how you can separate that. And of course, it won't be visible once you add your pretty little lid. So I want to let you know that, of course, using the different papers, you can obtain entirely different results. So here I've made this fall version using the papers included, and I also added the flowers to that one, so you get to see how pretty those are. So using the 2 dies included, you can go ahead and layer one piece in the center, the other one is a larger petals, and then if you'd like to, you can decorate them with Nuvo drops as I've done, and also with ink, and that gives it a really pretty look. There's also, of course, all of the other little branches included that you can then add Nuvo drops to. So let me show you a closer up version of that. So there you get to see how much detail you can add to all of those pretty little leaves and branches, whether you're using drops or simply using different colors of paper. So I've used different mirror card and satin card from Tonic Studios to make sure that it matches the project. I've also used the paper just included in the paper pack, which is absolutely darling. And here you get to see that I did not cut into that bow. And then I just used the double-sided paper with only 2 divisions in this case. Now the paper here, because it's from the paper pack, you can see here that it's not as thick as 300 GSM card, so depending on the gift that you may be placing inside, you may just want to use this paper, which is plenty, with a 300 GSM base, or you may want to do what I did with the Christmas one, which was to create the entirety of the base with 300 GSM card and then just layer the pretty papers on top. So this is created using, I would say, 8 pieces for the base, 8 pieces for the lid, and that's of course only counting the round layers. Then this one of course is using 12. So it does create a much more substantial project. If you use 12 pieces, it's going to be heavier, and you're going to notice the sound is going to be entirely different. So it's up to you which ones you use. Just be sure to have fun, of course, as you're crafting. Don't forget to leave a comment in the description bar down below in the comments. I love to read them. If you're new here, I do invite you to subscribe if this is the type of content that you like. And of course, there are affiliate links for all of these products included down below. So if you want to take advantage of those, go ahead and use them. You can shop anywhere in the world. So let me know which one is the first season that you want to start creating with. And I do hope that this video has been helpful to you, that you can be inspired and be blessed. And I thank you so much for watching.